All right, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone doing? Have you had your lunch? Yes, how was lunch? You can never go wrong when it comes to food here in Malaysia. Yes. So hopefully everyone had a good lunch. Dah kenyang semua, tetapi tak mengantuk kan? You're still wide awake and energized to continue for day 2. We still have a few more sessions, exciting sessions and discussions coming up. So with that, we'd like to invite everyone to please come in, take your seats, and also ensure your mobile phones are on the silent mode so there will be no interruptions later on. And please, just another reminder, keep your conversations at a minimum. Let's not be too loud. Sometimes it can get a little noisy. I know there's a lot to chat about, lots to talk about, but that can wait till after the sessions. All right? So with that, once again, for those of you who are still outside of the hall, would like to have you come inside, take your seats, get settled down, and we will begin shortly. Thank you. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to our sign language translators or interpreters at the back. Maybe you can wave to us. We have 2 ladies. Thank you so much for your services yesterday and today as well. Working hard, it's not easy, I know, for a forum like this. Giving us the interpretations, but making it a more inclusive forum. So thank you for that. And also because they are seated at the back, they do need to be able to hear what is going on stage. And for that to be accessible to them, we require your cooperation as well to keep the noise at a minimum level. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hope everyone had a marvelous lunch. If we are ready, we are going to now proceed with the next session, which is session 6. But before that, can I just have 1 minute, 60 seconds of your time? Can I have everyone stand up? I think everyone is very busy on their mobile phones. I just want everyone to restore their attention back to the stage up front. If everyone can just stand up, don't worry. I won't have you do anything silly or anything. Maybe stretch a little, especially after having lunch. Yes, after a long day, not just today, but also yesterday. Maybe look left to the right. Are your peers here? Maybe we could also have the door closed. I hope everyone is back inside the hall. All right, is everyone ready for the next session? Okay, thank you. All right, you may be seated. I believe our speakers, our panel speakers are ready for session 6. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as our lives become increasingly digitized, the question is no longer whether we have access, but whether that access is safe, equitable, and empowering as well. That is why for this session, the topic that we will be discussing is Bridging the Digital Divide, Role of Media in Addressing Gender-Based Violence in Digital Access and Social Well-Being. A little bit about the moderator for this session. Her name is Siti Farhana Sheikh Yahya, a news anchor banker at Astro Awani with degrees in international relations and peace and conflict studies. In her role, she reports and analyzes regional gender and human security developments. And together with our moderator, Siti Farhana, we are honored to also welcome the panel speakers to the stage. Everyone, please give a big hand for Dr. Benjamin Y.H. Loh, who is a lecturer at the Malaysia School of Arts and Social Sciences of Monash University, as well as Mediha Mahmood, Chief Executive Officer of Communications and Multimedia Content Forum of Malaysia. And we have Tehmina Kaoosji, independent broadcast journalist, gender equity activist, and also partner and comms director at The Big Picture Communications. Everyone, let's welcome them to the stage. We have an excellent lineup of speakers. I'm sure you've seen them, whether on TV or at other platforms, other forums. So we're excited to hear what the conversation or where the conversation will take us to. So without further ado, I'll pass the stage over to you, Siti Farhana.
Hello? Right? Oh, should I be there?
Yeah, if we could have everyone seated based on their names at the back, that'll be great. Thank you so much.
Test, test. Wow, what a lively introduction by the MC just now. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I see a room full of beautiful ladies and gentlemen as well, not to forget them. Right, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for having us and for staying on for this session. Such an important session as well. Right, I'm going to give a brief introduction of the panelists after this, but let me give you a brief introduction of the topic that we're going to discuss today first. Now, over the years, we've seen how the digital divide not only affects access to technology, but also shapes social well-being in deeply gendered ways. So today, we will explore three critical dimensions: how digital divides affect women and marginalized groups, the rising issues of gender-based violence in online spaces, and policy and legislative responses to it, as well as the role of media and digital storytelling in transforming perceptions and fostering safer, more inclusive digital environments. Now, I'm truly excited to share the stage with three brilliant thought leaders who bring deep expertise into these issues and diverse perspective as well. We have Dr. Benjamin Loh, digital ethnographer at Monash University, Malaysia, who investigates online activism and minority voices in Southeast Asia. We have no stranger, Ms. Mediha Mahmood, Chief Executive Officer of the Communication and Multimedia Content Forum of Malaysia, a veteran in law, media, and tech regulation. I take it that in a good way, a veteran. You know, she's been leading reforms for responsible and gender-sensitive content for years. And last but not least, Tehmina Kaoosji, independent broadcast journalist, as well as partner communications director at The Big Picture, and also my colleague at Astro Awani. She's an award-winning journalist, known for moderating high-impact dialogues on gender, governance, and always out there fighting for justice. Right, okay. Can we give a big round of applause for our panelists before we start? Right, I think we can move forward with today's discussion, but let's first set the stage on what will be our topic for today, right? If we look at the title just now, there's a lot to unpack. So let's first set the stage. Each panelist will kick off this session with a presentation, 8 minutes each, to give more context and framing to our discussion. So let's first start with Dr. Benjamin with his presentation, From Legislation to Inclusion, Ensuring Safe and Equitable Digital Spaces for All. Now he will explore how policies and inclusive approaches can help create safer digital environment. Take it away, Dr. Benjamin.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation. Really happy to see a very lively crowd here on this Friday on the eve of a very long holiday. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the gaps between legislation and inclusion, which is odd because I don't actually have a legal background, but that is my area of expertise. Next slide, please. So I'm here to basically talk about what exactly that we're seeing in Malaysia when it comes to the realm of online gender-based violence. And today I'm going to take a very, very deep look at cyberbullying, which is a very contemporary case now with a lot of issues being where you can sort of see the very clear gaps between legislation and also enforcement, essentially. And what we can definitely always see is that legislation usually falls under two main problems that we often see play out, which is that it's either often abstract or very poorly defined, and therefore gives authorities a lot of broad-based powers and discretion to basically decide on when to prosecute and when not to. They also tend to have a lot of specific, and in some cases where there are specific laws in place, they don't really match that with actually having proper enforcement. And you can sort of see that, as we'll go in the next couple of slides, a lot of these presentations are actually worded very well. They're actually done very, very interestingly. But you always see that, why is it that these cases never, ever go to court, essentially? Okay? Right, so next slide. Okay, so I know this is a little bit of a word salad here. You don't have to look into it too deeply, but essentially this is a snippet of the recent additions to our penal code regarding bullying, or cyberbullying specifically, okay? It was passed in December 2024 and only came into effect last month, okay? And honestly, this was one of 4 different sets of amendments to our laws that was actually the least problematic, and to be honest, I think they're actually particularly good, because just these 2 statements alone, 507B and C, it very clearly presents a very robust, very comprehensive description of various kinds of bullying that often falls into the cracks. More often than not, you rarely see laws against bullying, because bullying is actually a very, very difficult sort of like situation to process, especially from a legal perspective, unless it often results in some kind of physical harm or some kind of physical endangerment, which you then have a lot of other sort of like criminal-based laws to fall back on. Many of the sort of like expressions of bullying don't really fall into that, especially when it involves incitement or caroling others to actually engage in these kinds of violent behaviors. And as you can see from this, they also use a very wide range of descriptions to describe what are the kinds of harms that people can actually be affected by bullying. So it's actually very, very powerful. And to be honest, like I said, it's very, very good in theory on paper at the very least. Next slide, please. Yeah, so it's good coverage. It also indicates who exactly can be charged. And the best part about this is that it even includes who amongst them are ringleaders will also be charged as a result of this. So meaning that people who also incite others to engage in bullying behavior can also be charged under this law. And it also provides a wide range of bullying, including secondary effects, including driving someone to engage in self-harm behavior. So that's actually a very, very positive note, and it's essentially, of course, the reason why this law was passed was because there was this very, very unfortunate bullying case involving an influencer who was driven to engage in a very sort of like devastating self-harm case. But the idea here was that it was good to see that our legislators actually incorporated this into this law that actually finally got into effect in July. Next slide, please. Another thing that was really very good was that we finally have a law that criminalizes the act of doxing. For those of you who are not familiar with what the term is, doxing refers to the act of taking someone's private information or private identity-based information and leaking it online. And not just leaking out online for fun. It's leaking out online for the intent and purpose of trying to cause harm to that particular person as well. So this particular law actually includes that, and again, doesn't sort of like spells out exactly what kind of harms can also be caused based on that. So this was actually very effective, and most countries don't even have a doxing provision essentially. So for Malaysia, this is actually something that's incredibly positive and incredibly progressive. Next slide. So this is the slide that I think also sort of like wraps everything up in a very, very nice bow. This idea that it provides a very, very comprehensive and detailed list of definitions. Often, whenever you see a lot of our laws being presented, whenever they use certain generic terms like harms or crimes or whatever, they often don't give clarity in the definitions. But over here, they make it very explicitly clear that harms doesn't just include physical, but also includes emotional, mental, and even sort of like indirect forms of harassment or sort of like effects onto people that can be caused by bullies, essentially. Contrast this to the Online Safety Act, where throughout the entire act, there is no clear definition of what any of these online crimes are even defined properly as well. So by contrast, this is actually a very, very positive, very, very important act as a result of that. Next slide. So the natural thing that is on everyone's minds right now, and you can sort of see this happening with the way the government is responding to it, is that let's take a look at how this law is being practiced in the case of Zara Khairina. Okay, I don't have time to go into the details about it, but it is such an important case that is capturing the minds of all Malaysians essentially, and it is proving to be a very, very important first test for the anti-cyberbullying law essentially. The case explodes right at the point where the sort of like anti-bullying law comes into effect, and the interesting thing about this is that this case also highlights one of the big gaps that we have in our in sort of like the gap between our legislation and also enforcement. Because one of the reasons why this case blew up so tremendously, and especially amongst people from rural parts of Malaysia, is that there was purportedly or allegedly some sort of interference from elites who were seeking to bury this case or to try to hide the existence of this case essentially, the so-called VVIP interfering in the proceedings of the enforcement. And that's why nothing was heard about this case until much, much later based on that. Okay? And true enough, the response from the authorities is actually quite positive. It's also a little bit weird that the government is now sort of saying that, oh, we're now going to be training our police, our authorities, and our schools how to deal with bullying, ignoring the fact that this anti-bullying act was already in effect was passed last year. So you would think that they would also be sort of like training their personnel to also be aware of these issues based on that. But at the very least, they're actually addressing it. And if you look in our news on a daily basis, you can see that a lot of old cases are actually being a lot of cold so-called bully cases that really had no conclusive conclusion being brought up again, and then the bullies being charged for those cases as well. So that's a positive front, a little bit reactionary, but you can't really fault when progress happens in this way. Okay, next slide. And so this is one of the reasons why there is a problem that we see. On paper, the law is really very good, but the execution, the enforcement is where things can get a little bit more difficult to enforce, because one of the things that the law, again, I don't fault the law itself in failing to account for this, is that bullying, the act of bullying often happens because of a power imbalance, of power dynamics between the victim and the bully essentially, okay? Bullies essentially know that they have power behind them, so they have nothing to fear. They also know that they ultimately can get away with it, which is why they can often behave in a way that seems incredibly aggressive and carefree to a certain extent. And they also understand that the victims in many of these cases have little to no social value, and thus they believe that nobody will stand up for them, nobody will defend them in many cases based on that. Okay? And as a result of that, because the law doesn't factor in these power dynamics, it also means that you have to really ensure that your authorities or your enforcement powers are able to recognize these differences based on that. Because otherwise, if you do not, or rather if the victims or potential victims of cyberbullying out there see that enforcement authorities don't recognize this power difference, you start to see a lot of instances that, yes, this law is in place, we can finally protect ourselves from bullies, but you also notice that you start to see under or no reporting. You start to see a lot of bystanders who just don't say anything even though they're witnessing these crimes taking place. And of course, there's always the fear of retaliation that's coming from the offenders. And of course, punishment often follows power, meaning that sometimes when victims report these crimes, these acts of bullying, they are the ones that often bear the punishment based on that. Okay, next slide. So, just to wrap things up, I know my time's up. This is basically talking about the issue of lack of intersectionality when it comes to policy enforcement, okay? If you are a minority, a part of the underclass, marginalized, or you essentially feel invisible in our society, it can be very easy to believe that the law will essentially ignore you, that these laws, while great on paper, will very probably never apply to you in any practical shape or form. Because as we've seen in many other cases before, people who do report these cases, usually they don't get taken seriously by authorities. There's usually a lot of inherent bias and favorability towards power and authority. How often do you hear police, the police, whenever you report a case to them, and they immediately go like, this person is so rich and famous, why would they do these things to you, essentially? So getting over that initial hurdle can sometimes be a very sort of like daunting perspective for many people who are living in the margins, essentially. And fundamentally, we also have a lot of lack of sensitivity training or awareness of discrimination amongst sort of like the minorities and marginalized from authorities. There's this lack of care, there's this lack of empathy that's given towards them as well. And as a result of that, a lot of our underclasses essentially believe that in many situations, authorities always side with the elites in power, essentially, and they also believe that they can influence authorities so that cases can disappear or cases will always go in their favor at the end of the day, okay? I believe that's my time for today. Thank you so much. Sorry for going over time. That's it. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin, for your insights on the progress that we've made, but also the challenges and issues that we face to advance further. Right. I think we can brief a little bit. Don't worry. Next, we'll hear from Mediha Mahmood with her presentation, Safe Spaces Online, Tackling Gender-Based Cyber Harassment. She will highlight how industry codes and frameworks are addressing harassment and promoting safer online spaces. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Wow, to follow up on that, that's a bit scary for me. Hi everyone, good afternoon. So this is what I will be talking about, but I would like to start with sharing myself having lived experience with cyber harassment. So if you could just show the next one. So this was a tweet. This was 20 years ago, 2020. I thought this was very witty of me. I basically said, when people criticize the current government, it does not automatically mean they want the previous government to return. Maybe they just want the current government to improve. But then I added, just because you're mad at your boyfriend doesn't mean you want your ex back. So someone says, good analogy. Next person says, nope, wrong analogy. Next person says, seburuk-buruk kerajaan dulu, 10 kali buruk lagi kerajaan sekarang. Politics. And then the floodgates opened. And if you can read the comments, it got from bad to worse, and a lot of it was targeted to my gender. You could see words like, betina bodoh. The good thing is, though, they all called me Buddha, so obviously they thought I was young, but that's the only thing good that came out of it. But this was just an excerpt of the kind of reaction that I got from a very, I thought, innocent tweet. So this happens to a lot of us. If you're online, you probably faced something like this yourself. So next, in Malaysia, we have laws and legislation in place, but something unique about the Communications and Multimedia Act that not many people realize is that in 1998, they incorporated self-regulation within the concept. Because at that time, they did away with the Broadcast Act, they did away with the Telco Act. Because of convergence, they decided that because we want the internet to flourish, we also need to incorporate self-regulation in there. So we've got the Minister of Communications who sets all the national policies, etc. But we also have MCMC, who are the regulators. But one of the things that MCMC needs to do under their function is to encourage and promote self-regulation. And that's why they incorporated us to be the self-regulator for content, which is a content forum. And within the content forum, we've got broadcasters, advertisers, telco, content creators, etc. And what we're supposed to do is regulate ourselves. And we do that under social regulation, and we do that by way of a content code. Now the content code, next. The content code, or women in the content code, is very much upheld. What we have among our members are also women organizations like the NCWO. We also work with WAO and many others, and I would really much look forward to work with any one of you as well, because they are the ones who tell us what is being faced by women these days, what needs to be put in the content code, so at least content within our jurisdiction has all of this inside. So for example, the content code, it sets firm, common sense lines, for example, no identity-based abuse or hate, no incitement, no exploitative portrayals of violence, and it asks newsrooms to report the issue, not the identity. I won't read all of this, but essentially that's it. So the emphasis here is harm minimization, speed, and practical fixes over performative bans. In practice, it's supposed to turn values into action, and predictable guardrails for platforms and also for publishers, and faster remedies for users, and a safer space where voices, especially women and girls, can stay and be heard. Now, bear in mind though, we are facing an evolution of the content ecosystem into something which is a little bit harder for us to self-regulate. Because the simple fact is, if it's broadcasters, senang, we can deal with them, their license, etc. But when we're dealing with the internet, we've got content users, social media users, it's a little bit harder for us to expect them to self-regulate. And I think that's where legislation, such as the ones that Dr. Ben just told, is very much necessary. Next. Now, in the Content Forum, there is the Complaints Bureau. And I'm sharing with you a case in 2016 where there was a complaint made by the public that says, apa nak jadi, berita sukan atau berita lucah? And they base it on the sportscaster's outfit. Right? So when you think about that, when you think pakai baju something yang lucah, I would imagine something worse than this lah. But this was what they targeted. And what happened was the Complaints Bureau looked at it and said that there is no universal concept or standard of what is decent or indecent attire. In terms of the content code, it can only be determined by a common value that could accommodate all Malaysians of all ages, creed, or color. Now the the Complaints Bureau really waxed lyrical on this, but that's the basis lah. So it said that attire is obscene or lucha if it has a tendency to deprave or corrupt the minds of the young or be seen as disgustingly outrageous within the limits of Malaysian cultural practices and tolerance. So it decided that this is not disgustingly outrageous. It used analogies, for example, how traditional dress like the sari also shows the same area. But at the same time, while they said that this is not offensive, it's not a breach of the content code, broadcasters themselves realized that we have members of the public who might not be so keen to see such things, and therefore they could reconsider the dress code. Now, that's debatable whether that's a good thing or not, but this is one of the examples of cases that come to us. Next. Now, this is a lot more recent, 2024. This was a drama that was being promoted on social media. And the way they promoted it was to have this. OMG, Shah kena rogol bergile-gile dengan mat motor. 3 emojis looking shocked. And I'm doing you the justice of not showing you the scene, but the scene was long, and it was a gang rape scene. This was obviously to get attention. And that's the thing about the social media or attention economy now. Everybody wants to promote things, businesses, content with the shock value. This is what they did. So what happened was someone complained to us, and the Complaints Bureau essentially said that self-regulation is not about finding fault and imposing sanction or trying to restrict content. Rather, it strives to encourage civil behavior as prescribed as the content code. So the end objective is for the content provider to regulate themselves. So in this case, although the Complaints Bureau leaned towards leniency because of the fact that they immediately took this down and they immediately reviewed their content to make sure this scene never entered the airwaves, the Complaints Bureau also said that members of the public must understand and appreciate that their complaint, however, did not go in vain because it contributed to society in regulating the industry prayers. And the reason why I have this in is to encourage all of you. If you see something like this that you feel is really against the rights of women or girls, please do lodge a report, please do lodge a complaint because it can be taken under the self-regulation umbrella. Next, the new age of sexism. I'm adding this in because it's something that we're seeing happening and we really need some help having to regulate it because it really is probably something that self-regulation is not able to fix on its own. For example, the first one, deepfakes and digital abuse. As you all probably know, AI is being weaponized to create sexualized images of women and girls without consent, so that's a big problem. Next one, cyber brothels. This is not happening in Malaysia yet, but it is happening. There are cyber brothels where women are degraded, and when abuse is gamified and fetishizes violence, then it reduces female bodies to disposable commodities. Next. The metaverse. The metaverse is the new Wild West. It's a virtual space where harassment or simulated assault can occur within the first few seconds of you entering into the metaverse. And why it matters is because without safeguards, these platforms could shape a generation's expectations of relationship and consent. And finally, sex robots and AI girlfriends. This is already here in Malaysia already, and you can also say how it matters is it risks entrenching harmful expectations of intimacy and agency in real-world relationships. And finally, what I am personally very worried about, because I'm a mother of 3, is AI and the youth, because of the fact that young people's first encounters with intimacy now is being shaped by AI distortion, blurring boundaries between fantasy and real-world consent, which then sets social norms which are dangerous and that could echo through generations. So last slide for now. Next. While self-regulation can have all these quick fixes, I think we're at a stage in the content ecosystem where we need a lot more. I'm looking forward to discussing that with the rest of the panel. And final slide, just to say that safe spaces are not accidental. They are designed, agreed, and maintained. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mediha, for the presentation just now. Obviously, it sounded very scary towards the end. But, we thank Content Forum for being the gatekeeper, the guideline for us to follow. We in media really appreciate that. Finally, we'll turn to Tehmina with her presentation, Screen, Stories, and Safety, the Media's Power to Transform Gendered Realities Online. Now, she will reflect on how media and storytelling can reshape narratives and make digital spaces safer and more empowering.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you gathered here, especially after lunch. I know we've got the graveyard shift, but hopefully we're all awake, we're all alive, and I must commend the incredible presentations by both Dr. Benjamin and Mediha. Wanted to respond quickly to what Mediha had put up. My gosh, I don't think we have time to look through. I think I have 8 different folders of different forms of hate speech and GBV that I have personally received. I've been a working journalist for the past 12 years or so, and you accumulate different categories of gender-based violence and also what is technically termed TFGBV, or tech-facilitated gender-based violence. So what I actually want to start off by propositioning to you is this. Media is not just a mirror of society. It is actually an architect of power. And the way in which media reports on existing narratives, it actually shapes how we think about not just the world, but about ourselves, and in relation to that, how gender is covered. And this is particularly important because each panel that you see, for example, it shapes who is heard, what budgets become prioritized, whose pain is erased, and what actually is countable. So when we look at screens, stories, and safeties, what we're really asking is, does our media system make women safer, or is it actually entrenching the very violence we are claiming to fight? And how much longer can we continue moving forward when there are, of course, not every media outlet is doing this, but there need to be more media outlets that are engaging in progressive journalism. So next slide, please. So I actually wanted to shape this via the prism of the Reuters Digital News Report 2025. Now, this is an annual study that's been going on for a couple of decades. It actually surveys 48 countries across 6 continents. Malaysia is one of these countries. Now, it's really interesting to see that basically algorithms firstly are deciding what we see before journalists do. Did you know, a quick little survey that was done earlier this year across the EU and US markets showed that if a male identity, let's say a boy, let's name him Ahmad, if he signs up for TikTok with his name and a new fresh account, within less than 30 minutes, that young boy will have the algorithm aggressively push misogynistic videos in his feed. You've heard of influencers like Andrew Tate, et cetera, et cetera. How do little boys, as young as 7 or 8, documented across research in the UK especially, already know how to tell their teacher at the head of a primary school's class, expletive, get me a sandwich? They learn it from watching these videos repeatedly, and the algorithm pushes it towards you. We're also seeing that creator-led media, it's bypassing legacy newsrooms. So basically, we are seeing trust being reshaped, but also fact and influence. Most people who work as news content creators, who are not with newsrooms or independent journalists, up to 72% of them do not fact check. These are what we deem as citizen journalists. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but if you're not fact-checking your sources, your data, how reliable is it, right? So these are a couple of the other points. Naturally, I think you would have noticed this in your own consumption patterns. You're looking more at YouTube, you're looking more at TikTok, right? Next slide, please. Okay, so very interestingly enough, 40% of people are saying that they just avoid the news. And mostly it comes from the fact that it leads to negative feelings overall. So when this is what you are feeling when you engage with news avoidance, it is the canary in the coal mine. It's also telling us that, broadly speaking, journalism is failing at its core mission, which is to inform people in ways that empower action. If people are only consuming news and feeling mostly despair, then what exactly are we producing? Next slide. So let's look at that. Yes, they have a Malaysia number over there. Under 35, about 24% of Malaysians are actually feeling that they're avoiding the news because it's hard to follow or to understand. So if we keep producing content-centric journalism, this is going to be an increased outcome, particularly for not just the Gen Z, but also Gen Alpha moving forward. Remember, Gen Alpha is about 15 years old this year. So, what do we need to do? We need explainers that cut through complexity without dumbing things down. We need constructive journalism, which is showing pathways to solutions. And also formats, such as maybe if people are mostly on mobile, that's where your stories need to go. If they are on longer form YouTube videos, that's where you can go instead. Next slide, please. Now, this is a really interesting number. GMMP is the Global Media Monitoring Project, which has been collating statistics around representation of women. This is specifically in news media. Since 1990, the figure was about 20%. This is globally. It's about 25% as of 2020, the latest collated stats. So that means you're only going to be seeing an average of actually the opposite of what we see on this panel here today. There would likely be 3 men and maybe 1 woman. And I think we happen to have the flip in gender representation, specifically because this is a women's conference. AI and big tech. We've had the National AI Summit, etc. A lot of the private sector stakeholder meetings that were held, women were not even at the table. All women were there in functional supporting roles, taking notes, etc. I personally know how many, at least a dozen or more, women who work in leadership in AI and tech. Why were they not at those tables? We need to ask, in a room full of men, where are the women and why have they been shut out? Right. Moving on to the next slide. So, media bias, social attitudes, policy impacts. It is a straight trajectory. So when we look at the way women are framed in media, it reflects patriarchal power structures. We saw a couple of those horrifying clips, which Mediha was able to share with us, and repeatedly we see such viral-inducing content created, particularly in entertainment media. It's not enough to say that you should have responsibility. I think it needs to come to the stage where most likely creators, especially scriptwriters, etc., the entire production house probably has to be penalized. There was even a case of a local artist, Amelia Henderson. She was sued by the producer, etc. I do believe the backdrop to that was she did not want to perform in a script which humiliated women. That was the backdrop to that. They actually dragged her to court because she refused to. Yes, there may have been some other legal entanglements towards it, but she had not been previously informed of what the actual context was to the script. So such things. There is clearly pushback from those who are younger within the industry, but they also need legislation, policy making to support these good decisions, responsible decisions they're trying to make. So, next one, I'm going to go through really quickly. Underrepresented voices, who doesn't get seen, right? They are erased from coverage when we look at indigenous, disabled, rural women and girls, and their realities are flattened by our urban elite lens. So when only city voices dominate, public debate is distorted, policymaking also misses the ground truth. There are reform pathways, and a couple of these of which I am most proud to have been involved at the pro tem level is with the Media Council Bill 2025. Hopefully, it is going to be our once-in-a-generation chance to embed gender accountability into law. We also have global best practices, Al Jazeera's Feminist Newsroom Charter, put in place as of late 2023. It means that at least 50% of your stories, your sources, etc., are women experts. Next. So just remembering that representation isn't charity, it's accuracy. And very quickly now, I wanted to draw upon what Benjamin was making a presentation on, which was looking at cyberbullying as well as new doxing law updates. Allow me to emphasize the umbrella under which all of these harmful behaviors occur. So when we say cyberbullying, in particular, this has been covered very often with regards to female celebrities. We keep saying cyberbully, cyberbully. It is actually under the umbrella of tech-facilitated gender-based violence. This also means that it eventually impacts the ability of women, not only well-known public figures, but even, let's say, micro SMEs, the women who run these small online businesses, where you feel scared to even show your face or even reveal your identity as a female business owner. How does that impact your earnings if you are a single mother of 3 or 5 and you're depending on whether or not the sales from your cookie business will be able to support you through the month? This is something we really need to think deeply about and have potential legislation in place. TFGB also includes deep image-based abuse, deepfake sexual images. Now, this is very interesting. Denmark is currently debating upon copyrighting our individual image rights, meaning which you will need explicit permission from every individual. Otherwise, you will be in contravention of the law and can be punished if you create deepfake abuse. We had a case in a Johor Chinese school not so many months ago where the youngest victim was 11, 12 years old. The ringleader was a 16-year-old boy. This is occurring within our communities right here, right now. Moving along. So we need to look at what we can do when it comes to change-centric versus content-centric journalism. And our stories have to empower action, not just document despair. Reporting that follows through on systemic accountability, not just looking at it as an isolated scandal. Narratives that illuminate solutions, not only problems. Let me give you a very personal example to end this one with. Gender unequal or sexist citizenship. Yes, we know the law has been passed, etc., and potentially women as of 2026 mid onwards will be able to automatically pass on citizenship to their children. I am an adult overseas-born child. I am out of that boat. There are tens of thousands like me, yeah? We are never mentioned in the follow-up reporting. It is still not gender equal citizenship unless we make it retroactive as well. With that said and done, thank you very much. The media has power. Let's do more.
Right. Thank you so much, Tehmina, on your insights on where the structural changes are needed. Can we get another round of applause for all our panelists for taking time to frame this discussion today? Right. Okay. I'm pretty sure the floor are itching to ask our panelists some questions. But I think I have a few questions of my own first. I know there's a hand that raised up just now, but let me do my job as a journalist and ask a few questions first. Right. We're drawing on from the presentation just now. Let's start with you, Dr. Benjamin. Now, you've highlighted how legislation can be a tool for digital inclusion. But too often, implementation lags behind with many stumbling blocks. You've cited the case of Zara just now. So in your view, what are the biggest gaps between policy and practice in ensuring digital safety, especially for women and marginalized groups? Now, are they coming from structural issues, such as weak enforcement, or from cultural and societal attitudes, or that legislation alone just cannot change? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you for that question. I would say that very clearly, especially when it comes regards to women, it is really because a lot of our points in which women who want to report cases, especially with authorities, it doesn't matter if it's police or if it's even medical authorities or whatnot, there is often a lot of patriarchal condescension towards women in these situations. I would like to go back to one very, very interesting case that happened a few years back, where a woman indicated that she was the victim of a sexual assault because the person that she was with essentially took off the condom midway through intercourse, essentially, which is what is referred to in the slang term stealthing. And when she reported this to the police, they essentially said that this is not sexual assault, essentially. They dismissed her entirely. And even when she went to the hospital to get herself checked, especially because she was afraid of getting an STD and whatnot, the medical personnel also treated her in a similar fashion as well. And it is situations like this that further drive, to add to that case as well, later on, the reason why we even know about this case was that apparently it was, we believe that it was a member of the police that distributed an image of her report around, basically making fun of her and turning her into the butt of jokes. And she therefore became the victim of a very, very concentrated cyberbullying attack. She was forced to quit a job, she had to move and whatnot as well. And so that sort of like underlines the potential threat that many women feel, that even though we have these laws in place that are meant to protect us, but what happens when the authorities themselves, by default, don't see us as actually being victims in this case? Their first instinct always is to sort of like look at us and ask, is this really true or not? Are you making this up? Are you just trying to pull another man down in a situation like that? And so that's always like I said, that's the biggest hurdle that many women always face when it comes to reporting of these crimes. So that's how I would respond to that. Thank you.
Right. I think, Mediha, you also mentioned, when it comes to cyberbullying as well, I'd like to draw on, your presentation just now. What do you see as the most urgent challenges in tackling gender-based violence, cyber violence? Dr. Benjamin has highlighted how, this affects particularly women. Is it gaps in technology or lack of awareness? Is it resistance from platforms? And how can industry frameworks actually be strengthened to overcome these challenges?
I think it's all of the above, really. And I think the fastest way for us to do things, because when we're talking about awareness, that's going to take time. It's something that's also gradual. That's what we're doing here today. But what I also feel is that the tech plays a really big role to make sure that the harm is prevented at the very start. And I think it comes back to the whole idea of making safety the default. By design, it has to be by default. For example, as simple as making sure that the safe mode is the default mode, instead of having to turn that on. We should make it that exposure to risk and harmful content is something that you opt in instead of having to opt out. So I think that's one thing that we need to do, and I feel that it's very urgent because of the simple fact that social media has been around for years, but it's only recently that we see globally people trying to legislate, put in regulations, things to deal with the social harms that have come through from social media. Same thing with the internet. When it first came out 30, 40 years ago, or more than that, we had this whole internet superhighway. We were pushing people to go on the internet. We didn't think about the kind of harms that we're currently seeing now. So I feel with emerging tech, with AI, with everything that I gave you in that slide, we can't wait for the same mistake to happen. We really need to try and control it right now before it gets worse.
Right, yeah, in the essence, that was the self-regulation that you were talking about, having the awareness and speaking out about it. Right, Tehmina, you talked about how grim news can be, and we're coming from, news itself background. So from your perspective, what makes a story powerful enough to inspire not only empathy, but real behavioral change and collective action online? You mentioned some examples just now, but do you have any other examples where storytelling have shifted mindsets to mobilize communities to change?
Great question, Farhana, but I do want to start once again by giving you an example of how things have really not shifted. I promise I'll give you something good right after, all right? So what really strikes me is not only the incidence of casual, everyday sexism, which women face at all levels of society, but how it's covered year on year. In 2019, Deputy Minister Hanipa over then pejoratively referred to YB Azalina's appearance. A few days ago, last week, the Speaker of the House commented pejoratively on YB Fadlina's tone of voice. I'm not specifically highlighting the words because, once again, do not give oxygen to the harassment. This is workplace sexual harassment and gender discrimination. How does media reportedly cover it? A light-hearted moment. Something funny was said in Parliament. No. So this messaging, what comes off is that women, even at the highest levels of authority, have no avenue to push back against the type of gendered violence that they receive. And in fact, it was this current speaker himself, Yang Berhormat, who had announced that all new members of parliament, and there were roughly about 80 plus of them, who came into parliament as of November 2022 with the Madani administration, would be provided with a current budget allocation for training them on gender norms. Clearly, everyone in parliament needs to go for those training sessions. And we really hope that the feminists in this room are doing those trainings, yeah? All right? So, from bad example to good example. During the COVID pandemic, I recall myself and many others also working in the arena were constantly highlighting the incidences of domestic violence, the shadow pandemic occurring during the lockdown. All of this digital storytelling highlighting what was going wrong with the structure, not just individual incidences and increases in violence, led quite quickly, within less than a month or so, of the Ministry of Women back then under their leadership of Rina Harun, actually expanding the amount of access available, budget also available for shelters, and this was really critical because it was during a lockdown. So it shows us that when we get together, we harness and build up voices, things happen very quickly. So you can break that cycle. And news media, newsrooms also need to break the cycle by interrogating incidences where women are put under a spotlight.
I mean, it's about changing the narrative, like you mentioned, and tackling, those structural issues. And hopefully, anyone can pass this to our parliamentarians. Right, okay. I think I'm done with the questions on my side because I'm pretty sure there are very eager audience here who would like to ask some questions. But since the lady over there have already raised her hand just now, I'm going to give the floor to her first to come to the mic over there, the standing mic, to ask her questions before we take on the questions on the screen.
Is the mic working? Yeah. I have one question. We have seen some reports in the media that MCMC have been suing people for defamation. Do you think that MCMC as the regulator should sue people for defamation? I think the question more suited for Mediha.
All right.
Thank you.
Putting you on the spot there, sure.
I think you asked me that question because you might confuse me as being from MCMC. I am not. I am very happy to say right now I'm not. Okay, I really don't think I'm the best person to answer that either, because I'm also not very privy to what kind of defamation cases they're doing and against who. So I wish I could goreng this, but I can't because I don't know the facts. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Yeah, I could address that. So essentially, yes, because in the law here in Malaysia, we have defamation as you can actually do criminal defamation essentially, which is where you've seen cases where the government will sue people on behalf of some sort of, usually in cases where there is some kind of defamatory action against state bodies or state state entities as well, including, of course, royal entities based on that. On that front, I think, personally, as a media scholar, I don't believe that defamation should be allowed to be formulated in a criminal sense because, again, the state should be open for criticism, essentially. People should have the right to openly criticize the government, any entity as part of government, essentially, as a way to make sure that they can always be kept in check based on that. So on that front, this is the law that we have in Malaysia, so we just have to be mindful of it. And hopefully parliamentarians will try to push to turn it to repeal it, and we only will have regular civil defamation.
Right, thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin, and I hope that answers your question. Right, let's turn our attention to the screen. We'll take on the first question. While the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act should be applauded, is there a push to enact laws against online sexual harassment and online sexual violence as the world is increasingly digitalized? Can any one of you, do you want to direct this to Tehmina, please?
I'll take a stab at it from the perspective of the fact that while it's really encouraging that Bayu is working on updating the Online Safety Act, in specific looking at children, etc., but there's a need also to incorporate and integrate the recent updates in the letter and the language, whereby we refer to anything with regards to children as CSAM, Child Sexual Abuse Material. Now, many of us might remember there was a very recent headline which came out of a session in Parliament where MOFA Minister actually happened to share that a 12-year-old girl had been found to be so-called at the center of a website or that was actually distributing CSAM. Every single news media outlet, and in fact even what the terminology that was used in Parliament was pornography. Children cannot consent. It cannot be referred to as pornography. And in fact, under the updates from the Child Act, you even in print media, in online media, you have to refer to it as CSAM. So there's a need to integrate it very quickly because legislation is always catching up. But because unless we want to enact a deepfake law, such as what Denmark is doing, that might perhaps be the way in which to stem the tide. Remember that deepfakes also became immensely normalized in incidents because of the huge wave happening in South Korea. We as a global community, we import culture on a mass scale. So while we're also watching our K-pop, enjoying our K-series, that same sort of mentality of deeply embedded gender discrimination, which enables women and girls silencing in South Korean society via deepfakes, has clearly also filtered over into Malaysia. Think about what this is going to mean for women in the political cycle for all the upcoming state elections and the next general election. Very troubling.
I'd like to also add to what Tehmina was talking about, especially with regards to the language. I think what is really missing in our Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, and so the definition of rape in this country, is that we have a very, very rigid and very narrow view of what it is essentially. Even the idea of withdrawing consent is not something that is actually actively recognized. So, which is why often whenever you hear situations of sort of like consent being revoked or consent not being respected essentially, and one of the responses that always you hear that police will tell women is that, oh, this is a case of suka sama suka, also like basically both of you like each other essentially, and there is no reason why this could actually even be considered to be sexual assault essentially. So it is important that not only should the language be broadened to include a lot of these other more nuanced situations of sort of like sexual interactions and relationships, but there also needs to be increased training to ensure that sort of like these, like, you know, people who are manning these one-stop centers or first encounters with the public are able to actually sort of like be receptive and be able to understand the cases that are being presented to them.
Right, I definitely agree. You know, when it comes to gender sensitivity training, I think it should be applied widely across all agencies. Right, our next question is, when it comes to TFGBV, Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence, how can we ensure that platforms as well as perpetrators are held accountable? How important is algorithm transparency when it comes to digital platforms? Maybe Mediha, do you have any input on this?
Sure. I think one of the things, I think that can be answered with the other question about how algorithms seem to be driving us apart and all that, right? So I think one of the things that most jurisdictions are looking at is how to have more transparency in terms of how the algorithms work. And in fact, our government is looking to do that with the Online Safety Act. We'll see that when the instruments come out by the end of this year. But what I also think we should do is also look at the fact that these algorithms could probably have its own audit check as well. And if you're talking about gender, what we can also do is perhaps have some of those posts gender swap it and see how the algorithms treat those same posts if they were made by or for women, and see whether there are gaps that we need to fix. Secondly, I think we also need to decide on the fact that these algorithms, they can cause harm, at the same time they can be used as instruments of good. maybe we can use it to push certain messaging before it comes out. For example, I don't remember which platform, the algorithm can detect when you're about to say something sexual, like sexual harassment or cyberbullying, and it asks you, this sounds like a post that is going to be received negatively or might be harmful to the recipient. Are you sure you want to send this? So at least that is a way to use tech to sort of instill that kind of muscle memory that we want to have in the future. So I think there are many ways for us to explore this, and we really need to be able to work with these platforms and have it, have it done.
Yes, just to add on to what Mediha was saying, the problem right now is not that platforms are unaware, but that there's a clear lack of engagement of them, most likely by consolidated government blocks. We as ASEAN can take this opportunity. We have a 300+ million youth market under the age of 35, all right? We have consumer power. And when it's coming to platforms, let me just give you an example. Meta's new video AI chatbot has engaged in explicit, hypersexualized conversations with children under 12 years of age. The AI chatbot is by default a scantily clad female. A 16-year-old who unfortunately died of suicide in the US, his parents are in proceedings to sue ChatGPT, which enabled the suicidal spiral of depression that the child was on for many, many months. So there are clear harms, in particularly for the young amongst us. Tech platforms are not required to transparently develop new products either. Yes, there's a lot of conversation around child safety. UNICEF, etc., are doing what they can for benchmarking, business standards, ethical business. But at the same time, unless blocks of nations get together and use their consumer power to say no more, or we stop right now, how does a Facebook group get to 12,000+ members, like the one which Mek Yoon helped to get shut down recently, of men trading images of schoolgirls in pakaian seragam, etc., and lots of gender-based violence and pedophiliac commentary? It only got shut down because so many responsible Malaysians were outraged and reported it. It should not be able to exist in the first place. And what also happens is perpetrators do not get punished because they then are just deleted from the group and they go somewhere else. Where do you think 40,000 over men and boys from the V2K Telegrams group went to? That's where they went to. They scattered.
Right. I mean, there's definitely more we can do beyond, licensing platforms, and we can definitely look into, collective strength of blocs like ASEAN. Do we have one more time, a bit of time for one more questions? Would that be okay? Right. Okay. Algorithms seem to be driving us apart, and we're now living in separate realities, especially with the gendered nature of content being pushed. How can these gaps be bridged and gender equality be promoted? Right. Maybe we can take a brief answer, Dr. Benjamin.
Okay, so this is a question that I've heard before at sort of like a consultation session about how do we fix the internet essentially, because a lot of people have identified that algorithms are the main cause of this, so we need to go back to the more traditional internet. We need to go back to like blogs and forums and whatnot as well. And my response always is to that, you can't actually sort of like go back from algorithms at the moment, because the reason why we are in this situation is because algorithms have actually become the ultimate gateway that has actually brought people who are not tech savvy into the cyberspace essentially. Before algorithms, the internet operated in a very, very specific manner where if you were not tech savvy, you would never use the internet or see yourself being on the internet for long periods of time essentially. You were just like a visitor. But now, because of the power of algorithms through social media and whatnot, that has now become the reality for many people. And I think to sort of like switch off, turn that off, or go back to the way before might be something that is not going to be acceptable by many groups of people essentially. So rather than trying to sort of say that we should get rid of algorithms, it's really more about how do we pressure these companies, as Tehmina mentioned, to be more mindful about their role in sort of like pushing this content to people. A lot of the tech companies who are running these social media platforms essentially see themselves as sort of like curating or controlling the digital public sphere. But at the same time, they're not willing to take responsibility for anything bad that happens on these particular platforms as well. And right now, we're seeing a concerted push happening around the world, even in our neighboring countries, to pressure these tech companies to sort of like do more and to not just sort of like hand wave anything and say that, oh, it's too big, it's too expensive, it's cost prohibitive essentially, but rather that this is your responsibility. You want to be in this position where you control what people actually get their information from. You have to fix it. You have to figure out a way of doing it essentially. And on Malaysia's front, the approach that we use, I disagree with. You can check my Twitter to see my comments about it, rather following on the licensing regime, which I don't think works. But many other countries are using many, many more sophisticated and interesting ways to pressure companies to make sure that they are going to step up their game essentially. So that's what we should be doing, to be pressuring these companies to do more.
Right. I think that's all the time we have, and I think a takeaway from that is, we all play a role in advancing this. Thank you so much, panelists. I know there's a lot more questions on the screen, and hopefully our panelists are open if any of the participants would come to them to answer some of these questions. I think you guys are okay. Right. Okay. So I'm gonna wrap up here. We've heard today. From the discussion that bridging the digital divide and addressing GBV online requires not only laws and frameworks, but also cultural change, industry accountability, and the power of stories that shift perception. Thank you so much, our panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause. I hope this conversation inspires us all to play a part in shaping a safer, more inclusive digital environment. Now back to the MC. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Siti Farhana and the panel. A very interesting session indeed. Let's go for a group photo before we release you. Now, from this discussion or conversation just now, we realize that media is actually part of our everyday lives. No matter whether we like it or not, this is based on what we consume. So media practitioners and the users, all of us, I think we need to be collaboratively responsible that everything is done with care. All right, let's get some photos. Let's ensure that it is always a safe and inclusive space for everyone. All right, thank you once again. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's go for a quick 10-minute coffee break. Take this time to refresh a little. You can further connect with your fellow peers that are here today as participants. We'll see you back in 10 minutes as we resume with GOF 2025. Thank you.
Test.
Cek. Ada? Cek. Ada eh? Sekejap. Suruh seorang cakap, saya masukkan dalam.
Hai. Oh my God.
Hello, 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 hello.
Hai, ada suara?
Abang kena mute.
Apa khabar? Selamat pagi dari Belanda.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to resume with the last session for the day. For those of you who are still outside, please do come in. Feel free to bring in your refreshments and your food inside. You can enjoy your refreshments as we watch and listen in on session 7 that's coming up next. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are still outside, let's bring in your coffee and tea, your noodles inside. You may enjoy your refreshments and food while we watch session 7. All right? All right, everyone. Is everyone back inside the hall? We are ready to resume with the last session. I know we're excited for this last one as well. Interesting discussions we've seen so far. Please do bring in your coffee and tea inside the hall. You may have your refreshments as you watch session 7. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Now, let us turn our focus to the last session of the day, which is on the legal architecture of gender rights and mechanisms. A little bit about the moderator for this session. Professor Datuk Dr. Noraida Endut is from Wanita of University Science Malaysia. She is a pioneer gender researcher that has steered international collaborations on violence against women, reproductive rights, and gender-inclusive policy for over 2 decades. Let's now invite Professor Datuk Dr. Noraida to the stage along with her panel, His Excellency Edmund Bontai Soon, representative of Malaysia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. And we have also Melissa Muhammad Ahir, who is the Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, Suhakam, who will be joining us today virtually. Please welcome them. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I know we are hyped up, especially as we're about to wrap up GOF 2025. Let's keep the noise to a minimal, as we would like everyone to be able to access the sessions wholly. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to all present, my sisters, my brothers of the same cause. So, honorable panelists for this session, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the last panel session of the GOF today. Sorry. We may have saved this for last, but definitely it is not the least important. Okay. So the title of this session is The Legal Architecture of Gender Rights and Mechanisms. Before I go further, I would also just like to tell you a little bit about just 1 or 2 sentences about my organization or my center, Center for Research on Women and Gender, Wanita. We are part of University Science Malaysia, so we are very happy and grateful that we are able to collaborate with WFD and WBS today and yesterday for this program. Let me now introduce our esteemed speakers. Okay, so in this session today, we are going to only have 2 speakers today, although we scheduled to have 3. And one of our speakers is actually joining us from Amsterdam. Hi, Melissa. Okay, so I'm sure it's early morning there in her place. Unfortunately, Datuk Yasmin Haji Muhammad Sharif could not join us today due to an illness. So we hope she gets well. And also, in any case, I think both the speakers, both the panelists who are present today, will also be able to cover some of the issues that I think Datuk Yasmin would have or going to cover. Before I call upon our distinguished speakers to elucidate their thoughts, let me set the scene for the discourse in this session. So we are talking about the legal architecture of gender rights. So I don't want to preempt you by saying it's a dry subject, but I'm sure 2 of the 2 speakers are going to make the subject very lively, and a good discourse will come out of it. Just to make some kind of introduction about the context of law. So law basically shapes and reshapes society by regulating and deregulating actions, and sometimes also regulating and deregulating inactions or behavior of individuals, society, and the state. Law usually refers to a system of rules and regulations established by an authority, usually government, and recognized, accepted by society as regulating its actions and imposing sanctions when the regulations are breached. While we are mostly familiar with the domestic law in our countries, modern contemporary nations also widely accept the regulation of their relationships and interactions by international law. So international law, on the other hand, comprises rules, principles, and intergovernmental agreements that govern the conduct and relationships between nations or between nations and international organizations. A distinct feature of international law is that while nations agree to be bound by the international law, their compliance to the substantive provisions of the law is more difficult to ensure. Thus, international law is a persuasive rather than strictly enforceable source of law. It should be noted that not all international instruments that countries sign or agree with give rise to international legal obligations. In creating change towards gender equality, law can be a powerful tool, but also may work to the contrary in upholding the principles of justice and equality and to facilitate the upholding of rights and empowerment of women and girls. So in this session, we are discussing at least 3 objectives. I'm sorry, I wanted to use technology, but I'm still a kind of a little bit old-fashioned and want to look at papers. So the 3 objectives that we want to present to you in this session includes to explore the foundations of gender equality law in Malaysia. To do this, we want to delve into the key legal instruments, both national and international, that shape gender rights, including constitutional guarantees, statutory protection, and global framework like CEDAW and the SDGs, and perhaps also look into the ASEAN context, whether there are any existing or emerging legal framework. Secondly, we want to examine mechanisms for justice and reform, and in doing this, we want to assess how institutional tools such as courts, commissions, and parliamentary processes can be strengthened to uphold gender justice and respond to violations effectively. And lastly, we want to look at the connection between the legal frameworks and everyday realities, and to highlight how laws are experienced to diverse communities. So we are looking at the intersectionality of women's lives. I think primarily we want to look at how law interact with the realities of women's lives, but at the same time we have to look at the intersectionality of women's lives in terms of their background, socio-economic background, the context of ability or disability, the social cultural background as well. So these are some of the things that we want to address in this session, and we have with us 2 very abled panelists who will take about 12 minutes each to present their thoughts, to elucidate their thoughts, and then we will open the session to discussion with the floor. I think His Excellency Edmund Bon Tai Soon has already been introduced this morning, but I just would like to reiterate. He's a very important person as far as human rights for Malaysia is concerned, by the fact that he's currently Malaysia's representative to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or HR. But of course, Edmund is also a prominent human rights lawyer in Malaysia, and I think many of us also know him. So Edmund is a Chevening Oxford human rights barrister who spearheaded the ASEAN push for the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. So he continues to litigate and advise on regional rights standards. I would also immediately introduce Melissa as well. Melissa is a good friend. She's currently Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, or SUHAKAM. She is a lawyer by training, but I think she has mostly been at the activism forefront or the advocacy forefront of women's human rights and children's rights. Her career has also spanned a position in the government as well as in the civil society. So she was a deputy public prosecutor. And she was a key person also who drafted Malaysia's child protection legislation and now champion access to justice for women and children through parliamentary advocacy and regional training. Please give a big round of applause to our two panelists today. Okay, to begin our session today, I would like to turn to Edmund, whose leadership in regional human rights diplomacy has helped shape Malaysia's engagement with ASEAN framework. His Excellency Edmund Bon Taisun will open with reflections on aspiration to action, assessing the effectiveness of ASEAN's legal framework on gender equality. So the floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Professor, for the kind introduction. Selamat sejahtera, selamat tengah hari, selamat petang. I know it's a last session, so it's a bit difficult to digest a lot of the information. I see that there's a lot of information. I will just talk very informally, if it's okay. I know the topiknya macam very complicated, legal architecture of gender rights and mechanisms. But I think for us here, not all of you are lawyers juga, so maybe we can speak about it more in how it applies to us practically, and also in a way that we can engage. And I think I want to have more questions on it. This issue of gender rights and legal architecture means basically what is the law and what is the problems with the law and how do we, or what should we do to change the law. I think, as I mentioned this morning, there are a lot of gaps on gender equality in Malaysia, and the government, both state government and federal government, can take 3 actions that I want to suggest in this presentation. I have some slides which I will show. The first one that I want to suggest is, and why I want to suggest it, is anti-discrimination against women law and gender equality law. This morning, I mentioned this, pagi ini dalam kenyataan saya, I mentioned that we need an anti-discrimination against women law or in positive gender equality law, the Gender Equality Act. Why do we need this? I'll tell you about my own personal experience in court. If some of you don't already know, many years ago, there was this case called Nur Fadila binti Muhammad Saikin. She applied for a job with the Ministry of Education to become a guru sambelan for temporary teacher. And she went through the whole process and she was chosen. But before they were going to confirm her, they asked her, the government, the education officials at the ground, asked everyone that they were going to confirm, are any of you pregnant? Because, of course, if you're pregnant, you can see, right? If you're at a certain stage. But I think obviously all of them, you cannot see whether you're pregnant, but the question was asked. And this is very important because nowadays, if somebody asks you whether you're pregnant in a job application, it is actually not a good thing. It's actually a violation of your rights. Nobody should be asking you, are you pregnant? Or are you planning to become pregnant? Soalan tu sebenarnya salah. Yeah? Just to let you know. And if somebody is asking those questions, you should be telling them you shouldn't be asking these questions. Similarly, questions like, do you drive to work? Do you have a car or do you have a motorbike to come to work? Soalan tu tak relevan kepada kualiti kerja atau ciri-ciri sama ada seseorang perlu diberi pekerjaan tu atau jawatan tersebut. So going back to the case, Nur Fadila was very honest. She put up her hand and then she said, yes, I'm a few months pregnant. And then they withdrew the confirmation letter. Because the confirmation letter dah diberikan, jawatan dah diberikan. Tapi lepas tu dia kata, oh, I'm pregnant. Pegawai menarik balik surat tawaran tu, surat confirmation tu. So she came to see us with the husband, and now I can say after so many years, because this is a landmark case. You look at in the region, this is a landmark case, and in Malaysia it's a landmark case. I was very lazy. They came to see us many times. I said, alah, we cannot do anything lah. Because in Malaysia, undang-undang kita berkenan kesaksaman, hak kesaksaman bagi wanita is not there, right? But they kept pressuring us. And this, I said, you only guru sambelan, you know, what is your loss? So my attitude was that. But in the end, after a lot of pressure, I said, okay, we put our heads together, get a team, and on a pro bono basis, what we did was to research the law again, look at certain loopholes. And one of the issue we had is that if you know Datuk Shahrizad Jalil, long time ago when she was a minister of women, she had proposed an amendment to our federal constitution. If you remember, it was a victory for women in Malaysia many years ago, even before the case. And the government of Malaysia amended the federal constitution, Article 82, Article 82. If you, how many of you have belum buka perlembagaan persekutuan? Pernah tak? Tak pernah. Berapa orang tak pernah buka perlembagaan tu? Tolong malam ni sekarang tolong buka 82 perlembagaan persekutuan. Artikel 8 dalam kurungan 2, perkataan jantina, woman, right? Gender, right? Was inserted into the constitution. But if you look at the Article 8.2, Article 8.2 does not specifically say pregnancy. That pregnancy is prohibited discrimination. It just says no one should be prohibited in the employment of public office, blah, blah, blah. Okay? I don't want to go into technical detail, but 8.2, if you look at it, doesn't specifically say it. Then what we did was, we looked at international law. Today I mentioned the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, long, CEDAW lah. Okay, CEDAW. Malaysia has signed up to CEDAW, CEDAW. Malaysia also signed up to the CRC, Convention on the Rights of the Child. And Malaysia also signed up to the Persons with Disabilities Convention. So I said, we will do this. We will use CEDAW, and we interpret CEDAW. We asked the Malaysian court to interpret CEDAW to say that our Article 8.2, because we had made an amendment to the Constitution, has now incorporated all the CEDAW principles. Because if you look at CEDAW internationally, if you are terminated for being pregnant, that is gender discrimination. But in Malaysia, it was never recognized by our government, It was never recognized by our courts, and of course, it was never recognized by the teachers in the school. So we filed the case. Government said, no. We already knew what government was going to say. Government said Article 8.2 doesn't apply. We had to argue that CEDAW interpretation of gender discrimination, that pregnancy is a form of, because only women can be pregnant, right? Men cannot be pregnant. So naturally, it was discrimination, because you are discriminating the person, Nur Fadila Saikin, for a feature of her being a woman. We argued the case in Shah Alam High Court, and the judge agreed with us. So for the first time, we had a judgment, and you can go on the internet. We're very proud of it. I keep talking about it, because that was the first case that our courts have interpreted our constitution to apply these principles of gender non-discrimination based on pregnancy. This is against the government. 3 years after that case, second case, I wasn't involved in this case because I wouldn't have taken this case. And I will say it openly. The lawyer that took up this case, I think, misinterpreted the Nur Fadila Saikin case. Because everybody was suddenly very happy. Nur Fadila Saikin, and then we went to seek damages, and she got damages. 3 years later, the case of AirAsia. If you remember, in this case of AirAsia, I think the complainant was Rafiza. AirAsia offers you a training contract, offered her a training contract. In the training contract, it says that if you become pregnant during the training, AirAsia have a right to terminate you. Is this discrimination or not? Morally, discrimination, right? You are being terminated halfway, even halfway, or if you are pregnant during a training, that's discrimination. But what was the difference? Who knows what's the difference? What is the difference between Nur Fadila Saikin's case and AirAsia? Somebody mentioned it just now. We have the Constitution, right? The Constitution applies, unfortunately, in Malaysia only against government. We, in Nur Fadila Saikin's case, we sued the government. We sued the Selangor state government, yes, and also Kerajaan Malaysia, the federal government. In AirAsia's case, she sued AirAsia. AirAsia is not government. So, AirAsia argued, and the judge agreed, that Article 8.2 that I keep mentioning in the Constitution doesn't apply to AirAsia, because AirAsia is a private company. Is that fair or not? You have a Constitution that has Article 8.2, you have CEDAW that says you apply private and public sector, but in the Malaysian courts, when you apply it, you have two different standards. So if you are pregnant in a company that is a private company and not a public company, it is not discrimination. This is what the courts have said, the Malaysian courts, and that judgment still stands. But what does that mean for women? Does it now mean that in all private sector matters, when somebody becomes pregnant and somebody is terminated or punished for it, you can be discriminated? How can anyone then say Article 8.2 applies to all women in Malaysia? So if you get my point, what we need, why this need and why this gap is, that is why I'm saying you need a new law. You need a new regulation. And this regulation, in the next slide, must apply to both public and private sector. Next slide. Slide seterusnya, please. Yes, thank you. private and public sector. It must apply to the private sector. So, one thing that maybe we don't know, yeah, is that a lot of everything in the Constitution, unfortunately, only applies to the public sector. Perlembagaan persekutuan kita tidak boleh diguna pakai terhadap syarikat-syarikat swasta. Yeah? That's why a lot of these human rights issues must be a protection that's provided by the federal government, but that must cover the public sector and private sector. Number two, we need to have a mechanism. We need to have a system where if you have gender inequality or cases of discrimination, women or survivors or victims must be able to go and make the complaint. You cannot expect everybody to keep going to court. No, Fadila Saikin's case took us more than 8 years. If you don't have resources, you don't have the patience, and you don't have people who will make the effort, there will be many, many vulnerable, marginalized women who are discriminated against, but cannot seek legal redress. So that's why in this proposed law, we are suggesting that you need to have a separate tribunal or separate mediation center, where simple cases of discrimination on gender grounds, that you say, I cannot work because I need to look after my kid, can go and where flexible arrangements are made without actually going to courts. Yesterday I came back from the JB courts. I was doing a case, and do you know, the case was filed in 2024. In Johor Bahru, I am not talking about other states, but I know for a fact in Johor Bahru, my trial dates is 2027. You imagine the litigant, the plaintiff, and the defendant in a case filed in 2024 have to wait 3 years before they can go to court. Because we don't have enough judges, we have too many cases, and the cases are not running fast enough. Mediation is an alternative form of dispute resolution, and that's why I suggest that we need to think about this new law. The Malaysian government has already promised under the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights that they will look into this law, but I just wanted to share with you and the Selangor State government that you can already look at these issues even though you may not have total jurisdiction to solve all the problems. Next slide, cadangan pertama. Cadangan kedua, care economy protection. I want to highlight the care economy. Malaysia and Philippines in ASEAN have been pushing the care economy in ASEAN very strongly. This year we have, with KPWKM, a lot of initiatives to strengthen the care economy. The care economy is a very important sector in our society. It's usually very informal, but I think we need to recognize it as a formal sector and an important part of family well-being. Next slide. So care worker protection, right? Whether you're a migrant worker, whether you're Malaysians. Next. Recognized as formal work, fair pay and continued benefits. And because you're recognized as formal work, genuine work, then your employers or your private sector or even government will have to give a bit more deference to that. Next, and finally, is the rights of older persons. I have mentioned this many times. Last week, I mentioned in an interview that when we were pushing the initiative for the right to development in ASEAN, there was a question, how do we work with older persons? I say that we should stop looking at older persons, elderly persons, as a form of charity. We should stop looking at it as a form of kebajikan. We should start looking at it, and in Africa, in South America, since 2015, there is already legal recognition that there are human rights of older persons. Older persons are not seen in Malaysia as having rights. While they are seen as a human being with the same rights as other human rights, older persons are more vulnerable. More vulnerable because there are multiplied layers of discrimination, and we are feeling it. We are becoming an aging nation. We have issues of healthcare, we have issues of ageism, we have issues of discrimination, and a lot of the vulnerable groups are compounded, the older persons are compounded when they are women because there are cultural and structural barriers, including stereotypes. So my last slide, we need to look at it as a right, start talking about it as a right, start developing as a right. We need to look at a protection from discrimination, noting the intersection between older persons and less older persons, and look at benefits on healthcare and disabilities. I just wanted to stop there, just to put these 3 main points out, and then we can take questions. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Your Excellency Edmund Bond. I think what you have done is really to set the scene of the various contexts and issues that are relevant to legal consideration, to formulation of laws in the context of the national law, I think as well, but they are also very relevant in the context of regional and international laws as far as issues are concerned. I think that fits very well into what we want to listen from Melissa. So Melissa's going to present to us on international treaties and commitments, aligning national laws with global gender standards. So can we have Melissa on now with her presentation? I will remind you, Melissa, when time is up, okay?
Thank you. I'll try to keep to time. Thank you, Prof, moderator, and Edmund. It brings me back to when we were appearing together in KL Court before, when in our younger days, but now not as on the opposite side. So, selamat pagi semua daripada Belanda. Saya di Leiden University, kebetulan berkenaan CRC, Convention on the Rights of the Child. But as you can see on the slide, now we are going to zoom in more on CEDAW lah, and then we're going to link it to the national laws, yeah, and the gender standards. So because of time, if we can go to the next slide. If we can skip, okay. So very much because we are talking about legal architectures, and Edmund had walked us through the law and how it operates, it's very important to remember, yeah, the law as how it is written, or is it systems or practice, is not neutral. It's very much influenced by power and privilege. And then just now, Edmund also mentioned intersection. So persimpangan. Jadi apa yang persimpangan, is it persimpangan dilema ataupun opresi, ya, bentuk-bentuk tekanan ataupun di mana hak asasi tidak diperolehi. We will be looking at that, and then we will see if like Edmund said, this is not a welfare, this is not a charity, but we're looking at human rights and how to actually in real life, in our daily lives, achieve substantive equality and forms of gender justice. Can we move to the next slide? The signing speed is okay for sign language.
I think it's okay.
Prof, sorry. Yeah, because I cannot see the signer. Okay. The next slide, please. Okay, so just now, Edmund also mentioned CEDAW. This is just a quick timeline, right? Starting from 1995, now it's 2025. And then Edmund mentioned we did make changes in our own federal constitution, and discrimination on the basis of gender was added in. That was 2001. So now, after that, we also had in 2010, there were the definition on what does intersecting discrimination mean. Persimpangan dalam diskriminasi juga dimasukkan in General Recommendation 28. So bringing it back to Malaysia, after this timeline, we did actually submit, we can call it a CEDAW report card in 2024 in May, And then we receive lah, when we submitted our report card, we also receive an assessment. What is the status of women's rights or gender equality in Malaysia? So for the next slide. So for that last phrase, we mentioned intersectionality, yeah, persimpangan. So we will look at it in the next slide. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, just now Edmund said the constitution. And then Article 8, before that, it does say equality of the law. And the law is supposed to protect, right? And then added no discrimination on the basis of gender. So again, it's really nice that Edmund also mentioned another form of discrimination, let's say against older people, warga emas. If you look at the forms of discrimination, there is nothing on age. So if you're discriminated because you're a child due to your age, or if you're discriminated because you are warga emas and you're facing some difficulties, it's not covered in here. Also, I was told there was a request to add in also discrimination on the basis of disabilities in our law. But as far as we are informed, KPWKM or the ministry did not agree to add in or work for the amendment on this basis. But because we will look at some of our obligations, maybe we will see that maybe it could be another attempt to come in. Because like what Eamon said, when you are a person who is older and we are an age demographic, you may also face certain disabilities. So we will see the persimpangan, yeah, the layers of your identities that could cause discrimination in the population. Okay, next. Okay, so like Eamon said, this is not law school, but I would also like to touch on another case. This is a judge, yeah. He said in Suryani campus case. So because we were talking about our own federal constitution and the reading of what we said just now is supposed to also be read together with the rest of our constitution. And in this case, because it's the citizenship case, when mothers give birth outside of Malaysia, when fathers can confer citizenship but mothers could not. So in this case, the good practice was the judge said when you mention anywhere in the law, the masculine gender is supposed to include females. And this is a core principle. It's a pillar of human rights. So we can see how it applies in our own law and also with the international standards. Okay, next. Okay, so if nothing else from this session, if I have time to impress on everyone, let's look at laws just in substance. Number one, how it is written on paper, how it is embedded in structures and systems or mechanisms in Malaysia, and also most importantly in our culture. Do we normalize it socially? Do we have a society conditioning where women is not seen as a equal level to any other gender? We are of lower status. This is what we mean by patriarchy. Or is it the other way around? How does the law work? So remember when we said the law is not neutral, so sometimes people in power can have the positions of the law. So I'll give one example. So barriers to justice here is on gender-based violence. For the photo on the left, some of you may be aware because Selangor is very advanced on the Domestic Violence Act, multi-state agencies discussion. So here, when you see the law in practice, there's a lot of situations where, for example, mangsa atau survivor, they are disbelieved, they are victim blame, and if you see the phrase in Malay, that is the most common example. Many cases are discharged, not amounting to acquittal or no further action because the situations in real life where women's rights, there's a cross-section of things that are not enforced. So here is tarik balik laporan polis jika mahu dapat nafkah anak. So this cuts across access to justice. So this is what we mean. Sometimes laws are nice on paper or in the SOPs as the photo that I put there, but it doesn't stop the cycles of violence. And lastly, and I'm pretty sure Professor is is the expert on this, on femicide, on this form of gender-based violence where women killed by the loved ones is a global crisis. The data is like it's more than cancer-related deaths, but I capitalize that. It's very strange to not have current national prevalence data on this. Okay, moving on. So these are the form when I said substance and in systems, yeah, and also in culture. So how do we switch it to good practices to answer the questions of this topic? So we have to identify the inequality and write the law in such it addresses the inequality. And number two, if we look at systems, just now I mentioned an SOP. Is it consistent? Is it matching with indicators? Maybe throughout the 2 years, all of you have heard about the SDGs. SDGs 5 on gender, SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. And I will not say the least, the most important perhaps is on our culture. So laws as being the bridge to the change of behavior, to stop the patriarchal norms, whether that can be done and monitored and shown in evidence. Next. Okay, so just now Edmund has already covered Nofadila's case, which is the pregnant teachers, but we are questioning whether right now, is there already substantive equality for women at workplaces? This one might be Ministry of Education. So the gender mainstreaming, has it happened across all ministries in terms of practices? And up top is Indira Gandhi's case. So this case was cited by the judiciary as a good practice. They were very proud of the judgment of this case at the CEDAW review. But now it's 2025. What about the intersections with the Convention on the Rights of the Child? What about her daughter? Where is her daughter now? What about her daughter's right to have the love and care of both parents and her well-being? Nobody knows. Even after we succeed, we say that this is a good practice internationally. Okay, next. Okay, so I keep saying CEDAW and our report card, right? Some of the things that have been raised were also regarding those who may be marginalized. Just now we said equality before the law. What about minorities? Minorities due to their language, to their religion, or their ethnicity. Could they profess or practice their own religion and customs in an equal manner before the law? And one specific example that the CEDAW committee looked and came up with our results for the status of women's rights is also on indigenous culture. Is there any discrimination? Do they have the full right to land, for example, or practices on account of gender? Is everyone or all minorities protected substantively in equal ways? How about refugees?
Melissa, sorry, just can you hang on a minute? I think we lost your sound. Can technical person do something about her sound? Is it coming from her or from here? From her? Okay. Melissa, could you check your sound?
Check for...
We can hardly hear you right now. Could you just test or look at your sound from your side?
Yes, I'm using the mic
we are
now
right
to
now.
test
Thanks.
Okay, how far back should I go?
Maybe just about a few seconds.
Okay. All right. So again, we will see what's on paper, what's in systems, and what's in culture based on the observations of Malaysia, yeah? Because these were our international obligations. Next. Can you still hear me now?
We can.
Yes. If the slides could move. I'm just trying to be within time so we can move to the main part, which is the questions. Okay, one key part. Of course, there's a lot of rights that we need to cover. The one on harmful practices just now is supposed to cover certain things pointed out that has been made a culture in Malaysia. Is the previous slide. For one, I would like to comment Selangor, for example, on child marriage. Could we have that slide, please? On child marriage, at least under the Islamic family law, you have laws in place, but now is the monitoring, because I think we did have a case in Selangor where
Melissa,
a 12-year-old where a 12-year-old married off. Yeah, that's the end. So I'll continue first. The point is regarding child marriage. So although it's in Islamic family law, is it across all laws? Is it in the Law Reform Marriage and Divorce Act, for example? Is it in the Child Act that the minimum age is 18? So this again, yes, thank you. This again is form of intersectionality, because we will also be assessed, be reviewed regarding children who are married off, but mainly it affects girls more than boys. Boys are also affected. There are boys married off under 18. So both these points, whether CEDAW and CRC, we will be reviewed. For CRC, it's in January 2026, and the government's supposed to reply in October. How do all laws prohibit this harmful practice? Next is female genital cutting, especially among Muslims. It's set between 85% to 95%. So when we look even with other Muslim majority countries, it's highly unethical, according to World Health Organization, especially medicalization. So doctors here in Malaysia, why are we still doing this practice when it is not a requirement in across the Muslim world? And lastly, polygamy. So again, I also would like to commend Selangor before, because they were built-in features in the Islamic family law to address the gender inequalities, because there's a lot of evidence, including locally, of the negative impact in the family, of mistreatment, of non-payment of maintenance, especially on children. There was a case where the child asked, the father asked the child, hang anak siapa? He forgot that child
Melissa,
is
maybe one more
from which
minute.
mother. Okay. Sorry about the technical issues, yeah?
One more minute, Melissa.
Okay, next. I'm almost at the end. If the slides could move in time as well.
Is that the correct one? Gender stereotyping?
Yeah. So also bringing it back to earth on political participation. So it's not, that slide is not showing for me, but I'll just go ahead and talk about it. So credit to Empower, Berdaya, and Association of Women Lawyers, because they're looking at, for CEDAW, Malaysia's assessment is our women in top political positions is very, very low, especially in ASEAN. And I'm pretty sure Edmund would have also some thoughts on that. In terms of top leadership positions, we are very much behind. So project 30%. And I believe there are efforts in Selangor, but I was wondering regarding the state assembly. So when we say project 30%, it doesn't mean 30% only and we stop. Because if we look at the demographic, how many women are voters, for example, in Malaysia? So 30% is a minimum. And there's an effort to have a bill that the Association of Women Lawyers and Empower are proposing with the Parliament. So tying it back to our institutions, such as the Parliament Special Select Committee or anything that is in existence in Selangor, or like Prof maybe in Penang. So looking forward to the questions on this, including on this, let's say, menu on areas of women's rights that should be addressed by the law, but in substance, in structure, and in culture. So due to the technical issues, I'll just address things in Q&A, if that's okay, Professor Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I think a very well-rounded presentation on the context of law on women's rights in Malaysia. I think so. We are now going to open for discussion, but before I give it to the floor, I just want to ask both speakers, both panelists, to give some thoughts in relation to their presentation, because both actually have presented the connection between the international law and the domestic law. I think a lot has been mentioned that much of our law that promote equality for women in Malaysia, or that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in Malaysia, is framed by our commitment to the international legal obligation, or the international law that we signed, so the various treaties that we signed. But you also, I mean, for example, His Excellency Edmund mentioned that although we can invoke CEDAW in the cases by virtue of our constitution, by virtue of amending our constitution, but there are limitations. So the limitations may be because that it is not transposed or it is not harmonized with our ordinary laws. So, what is your what are both your thoughts on this in terms of Malaysia's in terms of difficulty of Malaysian legislature or even in general the Malaysian society in actually transposing, to borrow the European Union law context, to transpose or to harmonize our domestic laws with the international laws. So Melissa, should I give to Edmund first, or you want to do it first?
Sure, Edmund can go first.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Professor. Just two responses. One, when we say harmonize, we try not to have a template like Europe or Africa, but what we do is we want to make sure that there is enough protection for women, and this depends on how we look at our commitments in CEDAW. So there is some, one I mentioned, the Gender Equality Bill or the Act that I'm suggesting, because CEDAW already asks us to harmonize it. And number two, it needs to cover the private sector, but there are also reservations that we have not withdrawn from CEDAW. So government needs to withdraw those reservations. But in the implementation stage, the second way I answer it is that you need to ask KPWKM. The Ministry of Women, Community and Family Development, and I think the minister was here yesterday, you all should have asked her the difficult questions, because at working level, we have been asking, I have written a few times since 2016, why the government has not been moving on this. There are some sensitivities which I will just say maybe cultural, maybe religious, but as a whole, there are certain things which can already be done, which does not offend those sensitivities. I think Suakam may have the inside information on that, but when we look at harmonization of the laws to international standards, it has already taken some time, but even as we do the study and want to continue with it, we find that there is, even if you implement it, it's not going to come into effect immediately. So this really should be one of the agendas of this government, this Madani government, and I really think that you all should ask those questions to the government.
Not in defense of KPWKM, but I think some of the issues also transcend KPWKM in a sense that, for example, if you're talking about the work issue, whether the employment law, for example, because employment law will affect private sector, whether that can actually receive the international law and change. I think it has changed a little bit in terms of sexual harassment and so on, but perhaps in terms of discrimination, it was not really very clear in the employment law in terms of anti-discrimination. So, Melissa, your thoughts?
Yeah, firstly, I think we need to be careful when we keep saying culturally, because CEDAW, in case people would be able to read, or maybe not many know, the original drafters are from the Asian region as well. We cannot say it's a Western construct and then things in Geneva or in New York. No, the original content, for example, on the gender-based violence, had some drafters from India, and they had their penal code, which is almost a photocopy of ours, right? So I want to take this to look at the opportunities for us to refine whatever that we write in our law. For example, Malaysia was probably the first to have a standalone domestic violence law in 1994, 1999 in force. But until now, again, like Edmund said, the ministry has a high-level task force, but whether we have covered on intimate partner violence. There was a memorandum on how, when the cycle of violence is not addressed, it causes femicide. Women die, killed by their loved ones. So things like this, we don't need to say it's sensitive, it's not in our culture, therefore we cannot share femicide numbers, cases with Section 302 of murder, but it's involving family members. So we do need to match what's happening actually affecting women's life with what's in the law. So we can't just keep saying at the CDOT arena that, oh, we have so many races and religions, so we're not bound by this. It's universal. It's supposed to be paired with everyone, but it's also rooted to the ground evidence, the lived experiences of the women. So I'll stop now. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, both of you, on the first round of question. We have a few questions from the audience, but maybe we want to ask audience who would like to verbalize your question first, to ask question directly. Anyone? Yes, please. We have a male person.
Okay. Prof, can I ask first?
Okay.
Okay. Just a simple one. I wanted to ask, I think maybe Edmund and Melissa from Sohakam. How can Malaysia strengthen its accountability mechanism to ensure treaty commitments translate into the lived reality? I think when we talk, especially, I think for example, for the 30%, minimum 30% women political representations, it's been in the CEDAW for the longest time, and Malaysia has adopted it, but we never achieved that. It's not only that, for example, the child marriage, the CRC, Child Rights Conventions, CRPD, person with disabilities, these are all the international commitments that Malaysia adopt. But in terms of the progress, we know that in terms of the accountability mechanism, that's what we see at the moment. So thank you.
So we will collect. I'm sorry, actually, you are actually first just now. I'm really sorry that it got mixed up. So can you please ask your question?
Name is Rahimi from Subang Perdana, just about nearby. I was thinking in the Air Asia case just now, when you, Mr. Edmund, mentioned, it is because Air Asia is a private entity. Is it not, I was thinking it is because it's stated in the contract you should not get pregnant during the time. Is it, in that case, if that's the case, then it's not necessary for Asia to have that statement in the contract. You can just terminate you anytime. And also, maybe the next one, can also, anybody say, you must not get married during that training period or whatever. Is it considered discriminatory? Okay, that's my question.
So can you say your name again?
Rahimi from Subang Perdana.
Rahimi, okay.
Melissa, can I answer that first? Then you can go ahead. Yeah, Encik Rahimi, that's a very good question. Let me answer this by saying that our constitutional law, if it applies, and human rights, even if it's stated in the contract, the courts can strike down the contract. Means if the contract says you cannot get pregnant, some of the migrant workers that we see, their contract says when you come to Malaysia to work, you cannot get married, you cannot have babies. That is actually illegal. That's actually discrimination. So even though it's stated in the contract, you can actually strike it down. That's my first answer. So number two, if there is things, for example, I give you a very extreme example. The contract says you are allowed to steal money or kill people, right? The law says that you cannot. It's just that pregnancy issues, discrimination against women issues are still not socialized enough for people to say that pregnancy is discrimination. Child marriage is a form of violence, a form of some of the issues that Melissa mentioned just now. So to answer your question, if the Constitution had applied to Air Asia, that contract would have been struck down, meaning the woman would have been able to marry or get pregnant. So despite what the training contract says, you need to test it to our highest law, which is the Constitution, and if our Constitution also has international law, then you test it with that, and the courts can strike it down. I think to Wan Rusni's question, I smile because I've been doing this for so many years. And my answer actually is, do you want me to give you the diplomatic answer? Or do you want to give me, or do you want me to give the frank answer? Or do you want to give me the politically correct answer? Because we have seen this issue of accountability being raised over and over again. There are many ways of answering the question. If you ask a specific question, why we have not translated our CRPD, our CRC, and our CDAW to a full-fledged protection for these groups, one answer would be that, which I've already raised, is that our ministry, KPWKM, maybe over capacity, doesn't have enough capacity, doesn't have resources, but also there may not be political will on the part of the minister, or maybe the understanding to translate it may not be there. I've been through this. I've been sitting with KPWKM many times. Our Child Act is still not up to the CRC convention when we have signed up to it, right? Even though we still have some reservations, but we're still not full to it. CRPD, our OKU Act, we even drafted a draft for KPWKM when Hannah Yeoh was there to strengthen protection. You look at the OKU Act, it sounds very good, but all the persons with disabilities who come to us and say, look, I cannot access this, I cannot use the OKU Act to sue. When you cannot sue, I cannot take it to court. I said, look, I can't use this act. The act is a promotional thing. All the time that we have spent on the PWD Act, right, is wasted because it's promotional. You can even do that on social media or do an iklan. The words are very good. Promote the rights of persons with disability. Make sure, blah, 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 blah. But I cannot use that in court. So that's why the persons with disabilities are saying, you need to strengthen that act. Hannah had started a task force. I don't know what has happened to it. CDAW, same issue. We've been saying over and over again, the issue of workplace discrimination. You look, we have sexual harassment law, we look at, we have at work law, but that's not enough. The examples I've just given requires us to look at those accountability measures. If I was the minister, so this is the not politically correct answer, YB is here, right? If you are the federal minister and you honestly and don't have any issues, you say political will, let's do it. I give an example how Dato' Azalina has pushed the Business and Human Rights Agenda, National Action Plan, because she said, no, you just do it. I just want to launch it. I know that for a fact, because she said it to her officers at Bayou, and Bayou is just an agency. And they just launched it because there was so much push from the minister. So one answer may be that, right? I can say it because I have the experience and knowledge, and we provided a lot of feedback until, okay, I say, never mind. And then the answer, the government changes so many times, we don't know what's the government policy. One critique is the 13 Malaysian plan. If you look at the 13 Malaysian plan, I don't know who drafted that part, looks at support for women, categorizes women in terms of building happy homes while supporting men to go out and be leaders. So I do not know where the input came from. I was surprised when I saw it. But this is just an example of perhaps a few things: under-resourced, not enough capacity, or just political will to see whether we can, that we need to have to push this a bit forward. So I think that's another session for another day.
Thank you. Sir, Melissa, your thoughts on the two questions on why are we still here talking about the 30% quota, and it has not transformed into some kind of legal mechanism to ensure that we get the 30%, and can we say contractual, normal, ordinary contractual obligation, can it contain discriminatory provisions?
Yeah, so this relates back to the last point of the project 30% that I was talking about just now. And basically the presentation that was done in Parliament to the Parliamentary Select Committee on Women was that it doesn't work anymore. Whatever that was done in the past, now is the time for the law to say that this is mandatory with 30% as a minimum. So that's the bill that's being pushed by Association of Women Lawyers and Empower, and I think with, and also Berdaya, with full support of the PSSC. So in there, to ensure that it's also realistic and practiced by political parties, taking into account gender stereotyping or the triple burden that women face. We can see now there's even bullying, yeah, of parliamentarians, how things that are put on the responsibility or burden of women and things with being female are like made fun of as if it's a joke, when we know that the strength in many political parties are the women leaders and also the women voters. So I think that should be reclaimed, starting with the bill. That has to be pushed forward. So then it's not just tokenism, yeah, for that part. I'll quickly jump to the nafkah part, and this is where we mentioned a little bit just now when Sido asked us about polygamy, but it also cuts across because it's the Islamic family law. And within there, we need to see, okay, it's written in the, for example, on the law, but does the system work to chase the situations? There's a court order, is it enforced? And lastly, the culture. If throughout, no officers or no one in the public, there's zero tolerance of people who do not fulfill their responsibilities under the law, then it can be addressed. So the law cannot just stop on people. Yeah, that's the question about nafkah. And lastly, this is a great question about rural or underserved communities, because the CEDAW committee did raise regarding interior and rural communities, including, for example, the Penan, yeah, in Sarawak. So legal mechanisms have to match their local realities. So now there's efforts to make that they are paralegal, so they know how to access their rights. They are informed of their rights. Because there's even fact-finding missions before, when Penan girls heading to school were raped by loggers, and they found that it was an overall compounded issue. You're raped, then you're married off to an adult, so that's child marriage, and then you're cut off from access to education. So all these things must be throughout all laws. So when we say all laws, it includes ones on culture, ones on Mahkamah Anak Negeri and things like that. It has to cut across, but the gender lens has to be with the rights holder, which is the women and the girls or whoever else that's facing gender discrimination in rural or interior or remote areas. So I'll stop there first. Prof?
Thank you, Melissa. I'm just going to beg from the organizer that I think I want to let Omna just say, ask her question. Very short, Omna, please.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much. Omna Sriniong from Engender. I just want to say something about this thing about formulating the law. We know that when there's political will, as rightfully pointed out by Edmund, it'll be done just like that, right? We also know that there is capacity beyond government that can come together to actually enact it, because for the anti-sexual harassment law, the act, before that, the process was for the gender equality legislation or anti-discrimination legislation. It's during the time of Hannah and Dr. Sri Wan. And that was put on halt to allow the anti-sexual harassment legislation take place. So that special task force that was appointed is still around. And it comprised of academia, civil society experts from the ministry and so on. But the civil society experts were really major players in that, had great interest in contributing towards that. So I think it's a matter of convening. When you say come, people are waiting to be called. And so if this is going to be like a recommendation to Kementerian Wanita, I think we need to assure, not demand, assure Ministry of Women that actually you have people who are waiting to come on all these international treaties. We have large movements around that who have expertise and who are practitioners. And so when she calls, we'll all be there in these different groups to ensure alignment demi negara.
So thank you, Omna. There are questions in there, but also a very good comment overall. I just want to then wrap up by giving a short few seconds for Edmund and Melissa to say last, maybe positive words about what we can do with regard to law reform, especially to make sure that we can reflect gender justice and rights. Melissa, you go first, please.
Yes, a quick win perhaps is how much the Sustainable Development Goals and the timeline that we have now, because we will be reviewed on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, because there's things that the government has to face up and answer. I think we should leverage on that. And of course, with Edmund there, also things that are moving in ASEAN. With the Sustainable Development Goals, it's already mainstream with the government agencies. So we're not starting from zero. We just need to show them what needs to be sustained until 2030. I think this is an opportunity, especially if we pull out specific things from SDGs 5 and 16. So let's work together on that. And I think there will be one big capacity building next year in Parliament, where local and state authorities might also be invited. And it's on CEDAW and CRC, the intersections on that. CRPD, I'm not sure, like Edmund said, always an afterthought, no teeth, but positively, maybe CEDAW, CRC, and we can intersect. So that's all from me on maybe we can work together on this. And Sohakam is committed on areas of pushing forward the human rights implementation across Malaysia. Thank you.
Just quickly, I want to say that as a state level forum here, very important, the state and federal, of course, have different powers and jurisdiction, but there's a lot of things that the state can do. One example which I say which I would recommend is actually to allow channels for grievances or allow channels for complaints on gender inequality. That can be like a collection center to get the data and the cases, and then the state has lawyers or state has legal people, a bureau, for example, to filter those cases and then refer those cases to the relevant agencies or SWACAM to actually support the underserved, underrepresented and vulnerable women, survivors and victims. So the state actually can become a channel for that and not just allow the federal agencies who are already overburdened with cases to look into it. The state doesn't need to actually look directly into the cases, but where possible, the states may intervene even at that stage so that we know, like a pusat bantuan Guaman or legal aid center that is provided by the state. The state government has those powers as a start in terms of the mechanism that can be done.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a session on the legal architecture of gender rights and mechanisms. We continue to hope and pray for legal architects that will uphold gender equality and justice. Please give our panelists a big round of applause for this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Professor Dato Dr. Noraida Indut and as well as His Excellency Edmund Bon Taisud. And joining us online is Melissa Muhammad Ahir. Don't go away yet, Melissa. Let's get a group photo with all three of you in. While you're still dialed in, let's get a photo together. Thank you to the panel for underscoring the need for inclusive reform and active civil society engagement. It's clear that legal frameworks must evolve to reflect and support the lived realities of all genders. All right, does this work? Yeah? All right, another round of applause for them, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of the Gender Outlook Forum 2025, with session 7 being the last one for today. Now, to close the program, we are honored to invite Puan Siti Farida Abdul Samad, CEO of Wanita Berdaya Selangor, to the stage as she has an important call to action to share with us. Please give her a round of applause.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam Malaysia Madani, salam kita Selangor maju bersama. Yang Berhormat Puan Anfal Saari, Selangor State Executive Councillor for Women Empowerment and Social Welfare, His Excellency Edmund Bon Taisun, Representative of Malaysia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, Board of Directors, Wanita Berdaya Selangor, representative of state and federal government, departments and agencies, panelists, NGOs, academia, think tank, experts, distinguished Datuk-Datuk, Datin-Datin, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Wanita Berdaya Selangor, I thank Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Amiruddin Syari, Chief Minister of Selangor, Chairperson of the Selangor Gender Mainstreaming Council, for his leadership driving the state at the forefront of democracy, sustainable development that inclusive for all and recognizing women empowerment at the state level. Our respective Yang Berhormat Puan Anfal Saari, Selangor State Executive Councillor for Women Empowerment and Social Welfare. I salute her determination to lead the efforts from the grassroots to the top and provide platforms for equal opportunities for women to be successful in their respective fields. Her works in social welfare across Selangor is truly admirable. And I would like to commend His Excellency Edmund Bon, representative of Malaysia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, for being our voice through robust legal frameworks and policies at ASEAN level. We are grateful for your participation and insights at the Gender Outlook Forum 2025. A special note of gratitude also goes to our international delegates, including His Excellency Veronica Tan, Vice Minister of Women Empowerment and Child Protection for the Republic of Indonesia, Parents at Work Australia, Madam Emma, UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, UNICEF Malaysia, UNFPA Malaysia. Your presence at the Gender Outlook Forum 2025 brings invaluable global perspective and affirms our shared commitment to advancing gender equality across borders. Alhamdulillah, all praise be to Allah for this successful gathering and the smooth running of our two-day event. We are grateful for His permission and blessings that have brought us all together for the session. This gathering is a testament to our shared commitment and collective spirit organized by Wanita Berdaya Selangor and to our valuable strategic partners, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, WFD, the Center for Research on Women and Gender, Kanita, USM, Pusat Kepimpinan Tun Fatimah Hashim, UKM, and the Gender Studies Program, University of Malaya. We also extend our gratitude to our community partners, Yayasan Hasanah, for their vital support. Their collective expertise and unwavering commitment were essential in making this event a reality. Together, we are grateful for this opportunity to embark on the crucial journey of advancing gender equality in ASEAN. I also would like to extend my deepest appreciation to Wanita Berdaya Selangor team for their enduring commitment and wonderful teamwork in organizing this two-day event. Their tireless dedication, professionalism, and spirit of collaboration have been the backbone of the Gender Outlook Forum 2025. Over the past 2 days, we have been a part of crucial discussions and collaborations aimed at advancing gender equality in ASEAN. On behalf of Wanita Berdaya Selangor, I thank you for making the Gender Outlook Forum 2025 a space where we not only exchange ideas, but also build partnerships needed to act on them. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Wanita Berdaya Selangor was established with a clear mission to empower women, strengthen communities, and create a Selangor where gender equality is not just an aspiration, but a reality. Guided by Selangor's Women's Policy and Action Plan 2024 to 2026, we work through 3 core pillars: research and policy development, capacity building, and women's empowerment. We build leadership expand women's economic participation, promote social inclusion, and strengthen institutions for gender-responsive governance. The Gender Outlook Forum 2025 is a direct continuation of this mission. We recognize that globally and within ASEAN, gender disparities persist in economic participation, leadership, and access to resources. Systemic challenges such as workplace discrimination, a lack of supportive policies, gender norms, and gender bias continue to hold women back. These 2 days, I'm honored to witness rich discussions from our panel guests in formulating best practices and actionable solutions, from mainstreaming at the lower ground to legal framework, and up to policy levels in our mission to close the gender gaps. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we move from dialogue to action, I want to call upon all governments in ASEAN, political parties, stakeholders, and agencies to start committing to these efforts. Firstly, let's institutionalize gender mainstreaming and gender-responsive budgeting into all governance. To make this work, we need clear and reliable data that shows the realities for women and men, girls and boys separately. Without this, we can't see the true gaps, measure our progress, or design policies that truly work for everyone. Especially the government, they need to lead the effort in building capacities across ministries and agencies, encouraging women's participations in leadership and parliamentary. Second, we must dismantle barriers, promote inclusive policies, and build mechanisms that guarantee women's equal presence in government. Malaysian women are still underrepresented at all levels of decision-making. In politics, they often face discrimination, bias, violence, and structural barriers. To address these issues, we need to enforce protective measures, adopt zero-tolerance policies on harassment, and increase stronger party commitments. We must commit to improving our civic education and challenges stereotypes and normalize women's leaderships at all levels of decision-making, especially political parties, parliament, and state assembly are urged to build an environment where women can lead with confidence and respect. Next, all stakeholders, governments, and agencies should start investing in care infrastructure and recognizing care work as an economic driver. As we are aware, women spend far more time on unpaid care work, which is statistic is 3 to 4 times more hours than men, thus limiting their economic opportunities. Care work is the hidden backbone of our societies, yet it remains undervalued and unsupported. I call upon all leaders in ASEAN countries to invest in childcare, elderly care, and family-friendly policies in support of encouraging women's participation in the workplace. Believe me, by doing so, we are not only unlocking women's economic potential, but also driving GDP growth. Also, I want to invite industry leaders, innovators, and policymakers to close the digital divide, make online space safe while putting women in equal roles in green and technology-driven solutions. Women often face barriers such as limited access to devices, lower digital literacy, online harassment, and underrepresentation in tech and climate action leadership. These gaps not only restrict women's opportunities, but also weaken society's overall ability to respond to global challenges. Strategies for digital inclusions and climate resilience must be centered on gender considerations. To do so, we make sure that we close the digital divide and put women in driver's seat of green solutions. And lastly, let's ensure that national legislations are aligned with global conventions such as CEDAW and ILO standards, ensuring that rights are enforceable rather than aspirational. The law enforcement serves as the bedrock of all our efforts. Laws are the foundation of gender equality in hope that it will reduce the gaps in critical areas such as harassment, land rights, inheritance, and political participation. It must also reflect intersectionality, extending protections to women who face multiple forms of marginalization due to disability, ethnicity, or socio-economic status. So, to all lawmakers, enforcement bodies, and judiciaries, let's align our national laws with global gender standards, ensuring equal protection for all, because rights mean nothing without protection. To all distinguished guests of the forum, as I stand here on this very stage, I would like to convey my hope that Selangor continues to lead by example, demonstrating that gender equality strengthens our economic and enriches our communities. We also would like to extend collaboration, especially to the federal and other state governments in these initiatives. We must work together hand in hand to make gender mainstreaming a national imperative across budgets, laws, and developmental strategies. And to our ASEAN partners, together we keep gender equality at the heart of regional cooperation and integration. Ladies and gentlemen, the Gender Outlook Forum 2025 is not the conclusion, but the start of a stronger, united movement. From Selangor to Malaysia, and from Malaysia to ASEAN, let us show the world that equality is not just a dream, but the path we choose and the future we will build together. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Puan Siti Farida for that powerful and purpose-driven call to action. It serves as a challenge for us to rise, act, and lead with intention. Your message today reminds us that gender equity is not just a value we talk about. It's a responsibility that we all carry, a culture we build, and a future we fight for together. So thank you once again to Puan Siti Farida, and congratulations to you and also the team at WBS for making today's platform happen. All right, now as we move from dialogue to direction, the words of our leaders will anchor our collective resolve to turn insight into implementation and momentum into meaningful change. Now let's call upon to the stage Yang Berhormat Puan Anfalsari, who has been a supportive figure this whole way, to share her reflections. So please welcome Yang Berhormat.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Salam Malaysia Madani. Salam kita Selangor maju bersama. How are you ladies? Are you power up? Yeah. Okay. Alhamdulillah, over the past 2 days, we have witnessed rich discussions, honest reflections, and bold ideas at this Gender Outlook Forum 2025. We came together with participants from government, civil society, academia, the private sector, and international organizations with one shared commitment to advance gender equality and build a more inclusive and resilient society. In these 2 days, we have discussed a myriad of topics, all of which are very important in our current world. First, on gender mainstreaming and data systems. We agreed that gender equality only becomes real when it is built into the machinery of government, from budgets to program design, procurement, and evaluation. That means gender-responsive budgeting, gender focal points with real authority, and data systems that disaggregate by sex, age, disability, and geography, so that policies are guided by evidence, not assumptions. The takeaway is clear: no data, no accountability, and Selangor will continue strengthening our capacity, standards, and dashboards to make gender outcomes visible and measurable. Second, on women in Malaysian politics representation, progress, and pathways. The conversation moved beyond numbers to focus on the conditions that enable women to step forward and stay the course. Safety from harassment, fair access to resources, mentoring pipelines, and family-friendly political cultures. We heard that progress is possible where parties embed internal targets, invest in candidate training, and enforce zero tolerance for gender-based violence in politics. Our pathway is to pair talent development with institutional safeguards so women can lead without penalty. Third, on reimagining care systems through family-centered policies, we reframe care from a private burden to a shared public good and a growth sector. The care diamond state, market, community, and family must be balanced with practical tools, affordable childcare and elder care, respite services, mobile and home-based care, and recognition of unpaid care in the formal economy. Investing in care unlocks women's labor force participation and protects family well-being. In Selangor, this aligns with our care economy policy, care is work and care has worth. Fourth, from dialogue to action across ASEAN. Regional collaboration matters because our challenges are shared, from GBV, gender-based violence, to climate risk, to digital divides. We discussed peer learning on gender-responsive budgeting, common indicators, and practical cooperation on safe migration, social protection, and crisis response. The message is to move from ad hoc projects to repeatable frameworks and joint benchmarks so progress travels across borders, not just within them. Fifth, on power, presence, and pushback in politics. I think this is the most interesting session where we could learn from our politicians themselves, where women face coordinated resistance, online abuse, gatekeeping, and double standards. Solutions must be equally coordinated. Party rules that deter misconduct, rapid response mechanism for harassments, legal recourse that works, and coalitions that amplify women's voices in the public square. We commit to building allyship and protection protocols so that women's presence is not merely symbolic, but powerful and safe. 6, embedding gender-inclusive frameworks in tech-driven sustainability. Green transitions and digital transformations will define the next economy. If women are absent from these spaces, inequality will grow. We called for gender analysis in climate and tech projects, inclusive design in public services, and skilling pathways that open green and digital jobs to women and girls. Sustainability must be people-centered and gender-responsive, or it will not be sustainable at all. 7th, bridging the digital divide and the role of media in addressing GBV online. Connectivity, affordability, and digital skills are necessary but not sufficient. Safety is essential. We discussed platform responsibility, survivor-centered reporting, and newsroom standards that avoid victim blaming while signposting support services. The media can be a force for prevention and dignity. Our task is to align access, literacy, and safety so every woman can participate fully and safely online. 8, the legal architecture of gender rights and redress mechanisms. Rights on paper must translate into protection in practice. That requires clear law, strong enforcement, accessible legal aid, trauma-informed services, and coordinated one-stop mechanisms for survivors. Independent oversight and routine monitoring close the gap between promise and reality. We live with a common resolve to strengthen the rule of law for gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, for Selangor, this forum is not the end. It is a beginning. Through the Selangor Women's Policy and Action Plan 2024 to 2026 and the Selangor Care Economy Policy 2024 to 2030, we will first invest in care infrastructure and recognize care work as part of the formal economy. Second, mainstream gender perspectives across state policies and budgets. Third, collect and use gender disaggregated data for evidence-based decisions. And lastly, strengthen women's leadership in politics, in business, and community life. So my deepest appreciation to Wanita Berdaya Selangor. Please give them a round of applause. The Westminster Foundation for Democracy, WFD, Kanita USM, FSSK UKM, the Gender Studies Program UM, and Yayasan Hasanah as our community partner, and to every speaker, moderator, and participant who made this forum substantive and solution-focused. Distinguished guests, the path ahead will not be easy. Cultural barriers, structural inequalities, and digital divides remain. But we have a roadmap, partners, and resolve. Let us leave this hall with a shared commitments, clear timelines, and the courage to implement. Together, we can build a Selangor, a Malaysia, and an ASEAN where every woman and every man can thrive equally, where care is valued, leadership is shared, and inclusion is our strength. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam Malaysia Madani, and thank you.
Thank you very much, and Berhormat, please do remain on stage for the next agenda. Thank you for your words that have grounded us in purpose and possibility as we close today's forum. Now, on behalf of Wanita Berdaya Selangor, we would like to once again invite Puan Siti Faridah to the stage to hand over the call to action resolution to Yang Berhormat. As we all gather for the forum, this signifies our collective commitment to advancing gender equality and driving impactful change across policy, community, and leadership levels. A round of applause for them. All right, ladies, please do stay on stage because now it is time to announce the best poster presentations for Gender Outlook Forum 2025. These posters that you have seen outside of the hall at the gallery represent the creativity, research, and advocacy of participants who have translated complex gender issues into compelling visual narratives. Now, out of many outstanding posters, 3 in particular have been selected. Are we ready to find out who the winners are? Can we do louder than that? Are we ready to find out who the winners are? All right, but before that, for everyone's information, the selection of winners has been made by a panel consisting of Professor Dr. Intan Hashimah Muhammad Hashim, Professor Dato Dr. Noraida Indut, and Dr. Zairini Azmi, all from USM, as well as Associate Professor Dr. Norbaya Abdul Qadir from UKM. Thank you to the panel. All right, so without further ado, let's find out who the 3 are. Now, in no particular order, let's call up the first winner. The first winner is Anis Farhana Amran with her poster, When Does the Gender Gap Begin? An Exploration of Early Career Disparities. Let's invite Anis Farhana up to the stage. He'll be receiving a token of appreciation as well as cash to take home. Congratulations. Anis Farhana, don't go anywhere. Please do stay on stage. We want to get a group photo later. All right. And now the second winner. Suhaila Abdul Rashid with her poster, Urban Design for All, the role of gender in shaping safer public spaces. Where are you? Puan Suhaila, congratulations. Puan Suhaila will also be receiving a token of appreciation and cash to take home with her. Congratulations again. And the third winner, please give the loudest cheer you can for Farah Murshida Muhammad Fuad and Murni Wan Muhammad Noor with their poster, Does My Opinion Not Matter Because I'm Female? Gendered Hate Speech and Its Impact on Online Political Discourse. Congratulations. May your creativity and art inspire us all. Congratulations again to all of the winners. Thank you to every participant who contributed to this vibrant showcase of ideas. Now let's get a group photo with all three winners. Let's give them another thunderous applause. All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of the Gender Outlook Forum 2025. May the connections made here ripple outward into lasting change. On behalf of the organizing committee, I, Nadia Azmi, extend our sincerest apologies for any shortcomings throughout the event. Remember, always be inspired, mobilized, and united, and be ready to shape a future rooted in true gender equality. With that, thank you, and have a pleasant day ahead. Also, happy Merdeka, everyone. We do have an announcement. Someone left their pouch behind. To a Puan Nor Sarimah Saleh, please do claim your pouch from me at the rostrum in front here. Nor Sarimah Saleh, your pouch is here with us. Thank you.